What is up? What is up? Very interesting morning, Monday morning. It's funny, I was just about to go live here, and my wife was in the other room with my dog, and I was like, "Can you put in like headphones or something?" I feel very, what's the word? Very not just odd today. I feel odd. I had in a good way, in a kind of a curious way. I haven't done a live stream for a while, so it feels weird to kind of be thinking out my ideas. But fun, fun. Here's the thesis. So if you do watch my streams, some people love this, some people don't. I meander all over the place. I've gotten in the habit of kind of making a few touch points and writing them down in advance to kind of guide myself along my line of thinking. It's kind of worked pretty good so far. So I'm going to show you what those thoughts are today. We'll take questions and comments, but not as much till the end, and I'll just take a shitload at the end. So here are the theses. Jake Paul is punk rock. Okay, we'll get into that. Here's a few of them: analysis versus emotion, the fight itself, why people think things are fixed, and are they? Again, we touch back to that. Skill versus the ability to create emotion and reaction, about fighting the system and creating countercultures, and then the future of this. Okay, so that this kind of gives me a little structure, and I seem to behave well with structure. When I have a partner is always like, let Robin meander into some nonsensical ideas that have definitely helped me explore new things. It's valuable, but then also pull them back. So this is what we do. So Jake Paul is punk rock. Now, this is the thesis of today, and not meaning like, dude, this dude is like punk rock. But meaning more so like when we look at how cycles change, when we look at how fashions and trends and things react to the mainstream, you're already, I think, cluing in. Okay, yeah, I see the analogy here. Robin Black, can you make that kind of make sense? I'm going to try to make that make sense. Now, before we go on, the I am analysis is my thing. Over time, I've gotten better at it. To a point where I think I do it quite well. Some people agree. There's a key to being able to analyze anything, and I think this is super valuable when we're looking at Jake Paul versus Tyron Woodley, or we're looking at Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier, or we're looking at politics or COVID fucking vaccines or whatever. Is analysis and emotion do not live together very well at all. Also, bear in mind when we discuss anything, whether it's any of my contemporaries, we got Stephen A. Smith over here, we got, Joe. I'm trying to get extremes of different types of people. We live in a world where if I say something extreme, controversial, I get rewarded for it. So if you're going to really do analysis, today I could be a journalist of something and then just rebrand myself as an analyst because it sounds better. But to really analyze, you can't play these journalist games. You cannot play these conflict games, and you have to rid yourself of emotion. So it's really important if we're going to analyze Jake Paul versus Tyron Woodley, or we're going to see how and why Jake Paul is punk rock, which is the thesis today, we have to rid ourselves of emotion. We can't sit here and go, well, Jake Paul, I hate him, or I love him, I want to see that guy killed, or I think this guy's great, or whatever. If we do any of that, we lose our ability to analyze very well. So it's something you have to train, you have to work on over time. It's not natural. I was much more emotional last year and much more emotional 5 years before that. And over time, quick thought, emotion's super valuable. When you love your son or daughter or wife or best friend or whatever, that's emotion. Emotion's important. Emotion is real. But when you are going to analyze something, you try to free yourself of emotion and bias. Last thought on that quickly: humans are all biased. So don't ever say, oh, my favorite commentator is this guy, or I really like watching this news because it's unbiased. No such thing as unbiased. Humans are biased. We just try our best to try to rid ourselves of it temporarily. So if you hate Jake Paul or you love Jake Paul, you are unable to analyze with any sort of true, factual, reality-based analysis, because you're colored by your own passion and emotion. Passion, emotion, again, great things, just not great for analyzing something. So let's just touch on this fight super quick. I know fighting is the root of what I love to talk about, why some people may watch me do this. But in this case, the fight is somewhat incidental, but let's go to its root question about this fight. We have a high level very wealthy, hardworking novice. So somebody with 3 or 4 fights is a novice, novice of experience, but certain other advantages, money and influence, fame, these things allow you to train with better people, to do dedicate more time to training. You can have a masseuse, you can have a personal trainer, you can have a dietitian, you can have all of these things. So you're still a novice, but you're a novice who has access to many things. So you can become a very advanced novice or a very skilled novice or a very talented novice. So Jake Paul is a novice boxer with a lot of other advantages, most of which are achieved through money, power, fame, relationships, etc. And don't be mad at him. He earned all that through whatever else he did before. I've never watched his Disney shit, but or his YouTube channel, but that's he earned that. And he uses those things because he loves fighting and wants to work in this fight thing. So he uses his own leverage and power and influence to help him. That's okay. Anyone's mad at that. I don't know why you'd be mad at that. That's who he is. Tyron Woodley, trying to figure out how to say this with all respect because of my respect for him and all fighters who do it. Over time, if you fight enough, you are no longer the same. And we try to quantify this in many ways. People, oh, this guy's shot, or this guy's over the hill, or this guy should retire, or he doesn't move the way he did, or he's got brain damage to his body. We're trying to label everything. That's what we're taught to do. That's how the media teaches us to try to think, try to make a complex thing. Like what happens when you're a Tyron Woodley, when you're a great fighters, Frank Mir, these excellent fighters who become older, they change, right? And it's complicated. There's many factors. The hesitation, injury, just drive, the psychology that changes. We change, right? So Tyron Woodley is not the same guy who knocked out Robbie Lawler. We all know that. If we do look at his last performances, and I'm trying to say this again without bias or judgment or emotion, we look at Tyron Woodley's last number of performances. He's not that old. He's late 30s, but he has fought hard and he's fought long and he has trained for a long time. And if you look back to his early fights, how long ago and how long he's been doing this, it's very difficult on these people. We're just going to look at Tapology super quick. We look at Tyron Woodley's last performances. He hasn't won since he beat Darren Till. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They got Jake Paul in here weirdly, even though that's not an MMA fight, but whatever. And Tyron Woodley's performance was similar to how he had performed before. Again, no judgment. This is not a judgment thing. This is not a dislike thing. It's consistent with his last performances, right? And then you've got a young, driven, hungry guy, a lot on the line, many advantages of, again, the advantages of Jake Paul are advantages that money and fame and influence and power get him. Don't be mad at him. He earned that money and fame and influence and power, ability to train with better people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you got that dynamic. And then, the young guy ends up winning, right? And this is going to bring us over to this point very quickly. Cognitive dissonance versus the fix. So I don't know if we all think about the words cognitive dissonance, but sometimes things that we are certain about don't make sense, and they give us some turbulence, right? And sometimes we try to explain that going, wow, this is fixed. That's a weird one because, again, Tyron Woodley performed consistent with how he's performed for the last number of years. People will take a moment, hey, why didn't he do so-and-so when he had the guy hit through the ropes? Well, if you look at his last number of years, that's how he performed, right? There was nothing irregular about any of his performance. It was saying that this reaction, that's fake, that's fixed, that's a work, whatever. You usually only say it when your guy lost or what you felt you knew already didn't happen. That's what's called cognitive dissonance, where we're certain about something and yet it isn't so. And all of our certainty proves that this should be so, but it isn't. So we have to say, well, there's a flaw. The flaw couldn't be my thinking. The flaw has to be cheating, some other thing, right? That's what happens here. And it's nobody's fault. Nobody's mad at anybody. Nobody's judging anybody. This is a human thing. It's how humans behave. This is how humans behave. Young guy beat old guy. Young, hungry, driven, hardworking guy on his way up beat older, very established, very successful guy on his way down in the change. Very quickly, also want to touch on something. When we try to explain these things, often we will try to fill in the blanks. So most of us don't know anything about anything, and that's not being rude to me or you or anybody else. This is truthful. We don't know almost anything about how the world around us works. We hear bits and pieces of it through television. We watch the UFC. We hear, oh, this is how Woodley's a knockout puncher or whatever, MMA versus boxing. We hear these things, but these are highly complex things that we don't know really anything about. But we think these little fragments of knowledge are important, so we put a lot of stock in them. So we'll say, well, Woodley's not a boxer. But if you remove that narrative, Woodley spent more time training with a boxer to do boxing, sparring with boxers in his life, then Jake Paul won't have spent that much time boxing for like 7, 8 more years. And the reason we'll say that, well, Woodley's an MMA fighter, he's just a knockout heavy one punch guy. That's television. It's not truthful. Television is for entertainment purposes as fighting goes by really fast. Somebody's employed to explain it to you in a way that makes sense in 10 seconds. But in truth, you can't explain how. That's like saying a decathlete. So Woodley's a decathlete. And he's like, well, he's not a javelin thrower. Well, Woodley's still a better javelin thrower than every javelin thrower in high school or every javelin thrower who's been throwing javelin only X amount of time. He knows more about the javelin. He trains javelin throwing more than a javelin thrower. The sixth best decathlete in the world is a better sprinter than 99.999% of sprinters. Of course, the ultimate sprinter is a better sprinter than the ultimate decathlete, but I don't think anyone's saying Logan Paul is the ultimate boxer or the ultimate sprinter. He's just a young boxer, and Woodley is a decathlete who has boxed more than him. So we're looking for ways to explain it, because when we watch television, again, it goes back to this. It's not just analysis is damaged by emotion. Analysis is damaged by thinking we know things because we watched it on TV. So we watch something on TV, we hear how, and we don't box. If I don't box or I don't do MMA, I'll hear things and I'll think that's truthful. So that's why, I bring up we could just be a journalist and relabel ourselves an analyst, watch analysis, think we learned from that. But if you don't know how boxing is trained in the nervous system, in the body, in the mind, you don't understand even truly what boxing actually is. You have an idea of what it is based on being an observer, and same thing with MMA. So this idea that Woodley is not a boxer. Woodley has more boxing experience over the 20 years of being a combat artist than Jake Paul does. He just lost, right? He just lost. Hesitation. And then we'll explain, oh, if he did this, then this. Well, he couldn't do those things because hesitation, how you perform, how free you are, how you edit yourself, and the hesitation you do in certain situations, that is you. It's not like, well, Woodley would be better if he didn't do X. That is him. We behave the way that we can behave, right? So we get through all of that. The fight itself, I don't think anyone's going to remember the fight that importantly, even though I love all fights and they're all interesting dynamics, but we're going to remember this moment in time a lot more, right? This moment is what we're seeking to understand. Not the fight itself. There will be 6 fights that fit into this category of change. And if we obsess over the one punch or the who won that or what the judge said or how it's a fix, or we try to explain away these things using our experience watching Sports Center, we're not going to understand. So this is very cyclic. So when I say Jake Paul is punk rock, we try to compare Jake Paul and punk rock. First of all, what's punk rock? Okay, I know I'm older than everybody. I'm old. Punk rock was a type of music. Hip hop could fit. I could have said Jake Paul is hip hop, but people would have freaked out, and that would be better for my YouTube channel and better for engagement. But that's not my jam anymore. I've tinkled with trying to provoke and create that, and it freaks me out, and it's not for me. But I could have said Jake Paul is hip hop. All right, Jake Paul is rap, and people would have responded. I could say Jake Paul is grunge, right? I could say Jake Paul is hippies. I could say it's the 60s, right? These are movements that happen. Now, so let's just take, skill versus reaction. So punk rock was a musical movement that came along at a time when mainstream music had gotten kind of repetitive, boring, formulaic, obvious, and we just knew, okay, we're going to create this kind of band, do this kind of thing, put a song to the radio, have dress them this way, have this kind of photography, very ritualistic and formulaic. All of a sudden, punk rock came along and they said, "Well, we can't really play our instruments. We're not very good musicians, but we reflect the culture, and we have the ability to provoke a reaction." Jake Paul is exactly the same thing. He's not that good of a boxer, right? He's kind of like in punk rock guys were interesting and provocative, but they couldn't play their instruments. Jake Paul is interesting and provocative, but he is not yet that good of a boxer, right? Same kind of thing. Lower level skill with a higher level ability to provoke and create enragement and engagement and conflict and controversy and debate and discussion, etc. Right? Very similar. No, again, I don't think anybody out there, and if people are like, this guy's the best boxer ever, they're just real dumb. Okay. And I don't think Jake Paul or Logan Paul or any of the people in this, when they're sitting by themselves, the only way you beat Tyron Woodley is actually understanding you're still pretty rudimentary and you have to work really hard and you have to train really hard and you have to study really hard to have any hope of winning. You and so I don't think it's possible that Jake Paul thinks that he's the best fighter in the world. Because if he thought that, he would have lost last night, and he would have probably lost to Ben Askren. You only win these very difficult fights, and yes, and I use people when I do this, I'm saying that's what other people say. A shot, Tyron Woodley or Ben Askren. That's not my word. That's what people say. I'm just trying to kind of contextualize it for people. Even if you want to beat a shot Ben Askren, who's like not a boxer, it's still you have to work super hard to even have a hope of doing that, right? And you can't work super hard if you think you're a genius already. And these guys are not successful because they actually think they're great. They're successful because secretly they have enough humility to work hard enough to do these things, right? But so he's a lower level boxer, just like a punk rock musician is a lower level musician, but he's provocative and creates a lot of engagement and passion and emotion and reaction. And you're sitting in a world where everything is very formulaic, and all of a sudden you're the guy who wants to fight the system, right? Now, this is where this and this, right? This is where it gets a little weird, and we need a little bit of backdrop. So, who is the system right now? Weirdly, the system is the UFC, right? Now, and why is that weird? Well, it sounds weird. It isn't weird to you if you're 16, because as long as you've ever seen this thing, it's been this big thing. But it's weird to say it to anybody who watched early stuff because the UFC was a counterculture. Now it's the system, right? This is what interests me. The UFC was a counterculture. The UFC was like in the world of that snooty, formulaic, obvious, like overly ritualistic, boring, repetitive boxing. UFC came along and it was different. It had a different language, had a different look, had a different flavor. They fought different. It meant something, it was different. But now they are the system, right? And that was their goal. This is not a knock. This is just an analysis of these types of organisms. Once upon a time, this edgy, thing attracted the outsiders. It attracted the people who just wanted something new, visceral, different, etc. Now it's the systems on ESPN. Same thing every week. They were very formulaic production. We got the wide open in New York City, home of yada yada yada. In the epic main event, we got this guy versus this guy. The winner will do this. Is this guy the greatest of all time? Same thing, same thing, same thing, same thing, same thing. It's the system. When anything's the system long enough, it's not cool all of a sudden. It's the system. It's the man. The UFC was a counter to the man. Now the UFC is the man. So somebody like this comes along and creates a counterculture. They look for some flaw, some weakness, some new perspective. They're like, wait a second, they don't pay people well enough. Wait a second, this is formulaic. Wait a second, this is narrative driven. Wait a second, this is all, and they find a way to create a counterculture to it, and that's punk rock. Again, I'm I'm not saying, and I'm not trying to be critical. I'm trying to remove emotion or judgment. Jake Paul is novice. He's a very skilled novice with many advantages, but he's still a novice. Punk rock players, they weren't great musicians, but both of these things have the ability to provoke you and create a shock and make the man nervous. And suddenly they're cooler and weird. I don't think he's cooler. I don't think this is cooler. I don't think that show last night was cooler, but many people do. They think it's cooler. Even the people who don't think it's cooler, and in fact hate it, are more engaged. They'll spend more time hating it than they will spend loving the system, the thing that's already there. Are you seeing how this is happening here? And I'm trying to take this outside view. Again, I could give two fucks if Jake Paul is the biggest thing or if he gets knocked out. And that has to be your ability. You have to put yourself there if you're going to look at it free of emotion. Because if you're like, fuck this guy, that was crazy. This wasn't work. Tyron, what's wrong with him? Like you're looking for many ways to explain how it didn't go the way your passion wanted it to go, or where what you knew to be certain didn't go. So maybe it was a fix. Maybe the judges cheated. Maybe Woodley took a payday. Maybe Woodley's shot. Like you try all these different things, and it's just what it is. It's just what it is. It's just shit's changing. Shit is changing. And so give this guy another credit here. Really important credit. He's not stupid, right? Like he's not gonna go fight John Jones. Like he's not going to fight Dustin Poirier. He's not going to fight somebody who's at their best. He's going to fight somebody who has some weakness that could be exploited. And you can judge that if you like, but learn that from Floyd. He learned that from Floyd. Hey, I forgot something here that I wrote in here, which was about Kimbo Slice and about the New York Dolls. Kimbo Slice was the pioneer of this idea, arguably at the time a better fighter or more built for that, or came up with sort of some root advantages and skills that made him work in there, maybe. But he came along early, before punk rock was the New York Dolls in New York City. Like these things have precursors that you can see where they are and how they work. But if you remove your emotion from all of this, you can see what it is. You're like, oh, cool, the world is changing. Well, maybe I liked it better the way it was before. That I can stick to that. Oh, fuck, this is bullshit. This guy, this shouldn't happen. Or you can get really excited about, oh, yeah, well, But if you remove any of that personal connection or passion to it, and not that you want to, passion is important. Emotion is important. It's a root of life. To have, to feel good, to be sad. These are important things. But if you want to truly pause and assess, you pause and assess without emotion. And this is what's going on. You got a formerly a former counterculture, which is the UFC, who has become the man. When that happens, somebody else will come along and they'll be the counterculture, and they'll make the man, they'll go and show you the weaknesses and the exploit and how the man exploits, and how the system is corrupt, and this is done over and over again. And so where does this lead you? Well, this will happen. It presumably, and you see all these things. Remember, all of these cycles happen in fashion, in clothing, in politics, in the way we view science or religion, fighting, hip hop. It's all the same thing. These are the few. When I was a kid, I thought it would be terrible to be old. Now I think it's really cool because you see these things happen again and again and again and again cyclically. You see them happen in civilizations and cultures and all of these different things. And so you can spot it when it happens. Jake Paul's just punk rock. That's all he is. And not all he is. Again, no judgment. I don't dislike the guy. I'm not mad at him. It's fascinating, good or bad. He's going to get knocked out one of these months, and the whole world's going to go crazy. That'll show, and it'll make him bigger because he's already got this system going where it's not really, punk rock wasn't about musicianship. It was about passion at a time where everything was very formulaic and corrupt. And Jake Paul and fucking these rappers fighting and famous people fighting and all this kind of difference, and slap fighting and bare knuckle fighting and karate combat, and all these things are a reaction to the ultra mainstreaming of the UFC. The UFC wanted to be a household name. It wanted to be a mainstream sport. It is one. Combat sports, much like music, always has an undercurrent where when you are the mainstream, you will be uncool no matter what you do, especially if you do it over and over and over again. Eventually, the ritual wears off and commodifies your thing. You become less cool. And now the world, and we see it again. We'll see it in all things. 15 years ago, we could take Budweiser, or we could take, and that's just one that comes to mind because you see so many craft beers everywhere. None of those craft beers could even get into beer stores because Budweiser was too strong. Over time, they weakened the demand for weird and different flavor and more texture and sound and IPA and different blah, blah, blah. Same thing with chocolate, same thing with candy, same thing with fighting, same thing with wine, same thing with McDonald's and Burger King owned burgers, but that's a little old and retro, and they're cutting costs and raising profits and mainstreaming their marketing, and eventually it's boring, and all of a sudden Shake Shack comes along. You're like, oh, that's new and cool. That's what this is. I'm not mad. I love the UFC's the biggest thing. That's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being McDonald's. There's nothing wrong with being Coca-Cola, but that's what they wanted, and that's what they've achieved. And when you achieve that, other people come along and they're like, I want to do a little different. I want to do a little weird. And the one credit you have to give these guys, this guy beat a UFC champion last night. Again, if you think it was fixed, that's not on me. And you can consider this idea, or you can dig in deeper and just that's up to you. I'm not mad. Not mad. We all got to use our brains our own ways. We all got to explore thoughts our own ways. Um, but that guy beat a UFC champion, and that's the hard part. Difference between punk rock or chocolate or whatever. In fighting, you got to actually get in there for everyone to see. And I've done that. And sometimes you fail. And it's the most painful thing that guy's ever going to experience, whether he wants to admit it or not, is the day Jake Paul is laid out there. And I've had conversations with different people. CM Punk went down this road and he fucking had to suffer physically, but also there's a psychological suffering you have to do when the whole world, who's never takes any risks, wants to laugh at you, point at you, make fun of you from the safety of the middle of the pack where they live. Jake Paul's going to get laid out cold, and he's going to be in some weird. Anderson Silva got laid out cold by Chris Weidman. Anderson Silva is the greatest, or certainly one of the greatest. Fucking Jose Aldo seems to be right now just and again, we only see bits and pieces, little tiny fragments. So we don't, but the fragments he shows us, he's showing us signs of how one gets past these things. If Jose Aldo is as good of a human living on as good of a path as he shows us, he may not be, I don't know him. If he is, it's a result of having been laid out in the most worst way possible, mocked by everybody, mocked by all these people for months and years. And look where he came. And failure is an important part of this path. Jake Paul's going to get laid out at some point. And he's going to experience a type of hate and a type of mockery that very few humans in history have ever experienced. He's going to experience that. If he continues, it could have been last night. Tyron Woodley could have laid that guy out in front of everybody in some weird position, because that's how we get knocked out. Or, I was taken out on a stretcher while people booed me. It's painful. It's incredibly painful. Failing is painful. That's why most people don't try. This guy is trying at the highest level, putting himself on a tightrope where he is going to, and not maybe, if he keeps taking tougher and tougher fights, cool. Now it's like, who's next? I want to fight Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz would most likely lay you out, right? I'm not going to fight Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor had a broken leg, not a bad time to try, whatever. But he could lay you out. You're gonna get knocked out in fighting. You're gonna get embarrassed. You're gonna get shamed. That's part of it. Right? That's part of it. And the cycle continues. And if he doesn't, what the reason he didn't is then he becomes the system. He becomes the man. The way the UFC became the system, the mainstream, McDonald's. If the inevitable path is it goes on and then he does that, and somebody else comes and makes him look stupid. Hair metal in the 1980s, these guys had if you ever saw my band, big hair and makeup and flashy clothes. I came much later, which was of course real dumb, but that's what I liked. And then all of a sudden grunge came along and made them look stupid. And then later something else came along and the grunge is like, why are these guys wearing their long johns in the summer outside? We all end up looking stupid if the new younger thing comes along. And that's what's happening right now. And Jake Paul will look stupid in 2 years too. And it's an inevitable part of his future. And you just have to live it, accept it, and learn what you can from it. Again, there are many examples of people who eventually get embarrassed and it makes them a better person. That's all anyone's trying to do, right? We're just trying to figure out how to, why do we even watch, listen to music, consume art, read books, watch fights? We're trying to learn something. I think we are, whether we know it or not. That's what we can learn here. Things change inevitably. When they change, there's a reaction. Some people are real mad. They hate Jake Paul. And they hated the UFC before that. They hated the UFC in the late 90s, early 2000s. As you got into Matt Hughes and stuff, there were a whole boxing world people who made fun of the UFC, hated it, pointed at it, said it was a stupid and bad. But now the UFC is boxing, and these Jake Paul types are punk rock. The way that mainstream music looked at punk rock, UFC is mainstream, and so is mainstream boxing. Looks at these guys. They're worse musicians, they're lower level fighters, but they create passion, engagement, emotion, etc. Right? It's the same thing. And we're going to see it again. If I'm fortunate enough to live, you know, to see my children grow up. I don't have children yet, but incoming. Uh, to see them grow up, they'll see these cycles again and again and again and again. And it's just part of life. You can be mad. You can do whatever you want. You can be mad if you like. But this is it. I'm going to take a couple super quick questions, and then we're going to check on my sleeping dog and see how he's doing. A lot of nice things, a lot of nice comments. When we get, please explain what you mean. He's punk rock. I hope I did that. So we touched on this. I mean, James, and you could say that, but I'll guarantee you, if you talk to Tyron Woodley 2 days, a week before, a day before, and an hour before, he's like, I'm gonna fucking kill this kid. I'm gonna lay this kid out. It's gonna make me a ton of money. I'm gonna get a ton of fame. I'm gonna gain followers. My rap record. This is what he would have been thinking. Now, how that changes when you get tired and you're an older guy and you've been down this road and you're coming off 4 losses in a row and you learn to accept failure, that's different. But if you asked him a minute before, an hour before, and a day before, he would have told you he's there and he believed it. And he was there to do it in his own mind. How he performed, you can be mad at him all you want, but that's him. He's doing his best, right? And I think but the kid is on the sauce again. Maybe he is. Maybe Tyron is. We don't know any of this, right? If we're looking for explanations as to why our beliefs didn't go our way, it's a dangerous thing. And we start to lose connection to the world. Jake, not that good. He should fight someone his age and size. This is an interesting comment. You're right. And that's why he doesn't, right? Think about it. Imagine instead of him just being a character on TV, imagine you're him. And you're like, okay, wait a second. I got this thing going. I'm not that good yet. I think I might be one day, but I'm not yet. So what should I do? I got to find guys who are like a little smaller, a little older, shot. I use that in air quotes in case this somehow share it on a podcast and you don't see me making air quotes, shot, because that's not my word. That's a very loose, lazy word to explain all of the changes that happens as we age, right? But of course he's Jake. So your thing is great. Your smart water, your sentence is great. Jake's not that good. Accurate. He should fight someone his age and size. Not if you're him, right? Think about it be him. If you want to practice empathy, you have to imagine being him. Everyone's making fun of you. You're making a lot of money. There's a ton of pressure. You're not that good yet. Of course, this is what you would do. Right? Don't judge him. Don't judge him. We'd like him to do something else, but if you were him, you'd do that, right? Jake put in the work. Yeah, he's decent as boxing. Okay, so put in the work, undoubtedly. If these guys got kind of successful on YouTube and then went away, we'd be like, well, these things can happen. You can just sort of catch lightning, get lucky, whatever. But this kind of consistency is a hard work. And then plus he has some balls, no question about it. So I got the first and the last in total agreement. Is decent at boxing? That's just relative. Is he as good as he will be in 5 years if he works this hard? No, he'll look back at here and laugh. That'll be good. He might be pretty good. Is he better than he was a year and a half ago? Of course. And that's what we can learn from this, is that sort of ever-changing nature of self-improvement. It works through practice. You get better. You practice piano, you get better at piano. You practice boxing, you get better at boxing. If you're not that good yet, you fight easier fights so that you can keep this machine going, right? Look like Jake can take a punch and throw heavy. All of that, yeah, it kind of looks like that, but questionable. If something's questioned, so nobody's fixed. We're not fixed quantities. If somebody says Conor McGregor fades late in the fight, well, if he knows that, he trains and changes that, right? If you're like, hey, I don't run very fast, you practice, you'll run faster. I can only bench press 80 pounds. Well, you do a lot of work. Eventually, you bench press 120, right? This is life. So these things, these types of fixed assessments are things that we do for television. You go to a desk, Michael Bisping, what do you think? Oh, I think this guy's going to take him down. Robin, what do you think? Well, if he uses his jab, he's heavy on the front leg. We just talk nonsense because that's how we do television. This is not the truth. These are changing people. Nate Diaz, the key to Nate Diaz is to use a lot of leg kicks. Fucking Just Bleed 420 on Twitter knows that, but Nate Diaz doesn't know that? Of course he does. So he changes it. Now you throw leg kicks, he's going to punch you in the face, right? He prepares for it. They're ever changing. We're all like that. Woodley didn't take a dive. That was typical T-Wood. So I don't know. Again, typical. People change, but it's consistent. And it's harder to change later. The drive changes. Even our biological levels of testosterone and growth hormone and all these things change. It's harder. It's easier when you're a baby. Babies learn fucking super fast. And like 4-year-olds, you're like, holy shit, that guy got so much better. 50-year-olds, we still learn. But it's a little harder, right? And you have to be, and your drive might be lower, so it's more difficult. Let's see what else we got. I'm gonna take a few more. And this is not a criticism. This is an observation. Again, trying to remove any bias, as much bias as I can, and as much emotion as I can. Yeah, what going into a cage and fighting represented in 2001 is very different than what it does now, right? After that, that's just the nature of repetition. Things, yes, as a matter of fact, things are good, and I'm very grateful. Yeah, a lot of nice comments from people. I'm gonna put up a couple more, and then we'll wrap it up. This was super fun. If you thought punk bands didn't have so much musical chops as other genres, you're listening to the wrong bands. The Clash, X, and Television were all amazing musicians. Yeah, there are others for sure. And there are others in this genre who will be better than each other, right? There are others in this sort of punk rock type combat sports person where passion and emotion there'll be some, it'll be a sliding scale. Some will be much better. Some people, and there were punk rock bands where you're like, oh, fuck, that guy could play, right? So it is a generalization, but these things are imperfect. Nuance is the key. That's also why you do long form podcasts, so we can have these little discussions of nuance. The avoidance of nuance, sound bites at a desk, wearing a suit, well lit. That's why we think we understand things. Well, this guy's got a great chin, but this guy's got heavy hands. Why didn't he knock him out? Well, those are very complex ideas that we've reduced down to a soundbite. They're not real, right? But thank you. What Jake is best at is finding older, semi-retired non-boxers to beat, so he can brag about being undefeated. Correct. Right? It's just good strategy. Again, if you don't like him, you'll look at that strategy and be like, fuck this kid, this is bullshit. But if you were him, if you were a regular human being who'd worked really hard, who understood that you've only boxed for 5 years and here you are able to do all this kind of stuff, you'd be like, I better find people I can beat. I'm not going to go get knocked out by Canelo. That's crazy. I'll talk about it. Like if you think about it as if you were there, that's what you'd do too, right? If you were there, most of us wouldn't even get there because it's all pretty weird, but this is also a very modern, fake it, create the paradigm. And there's an early Star Trek thing where Captain Kirk, actually in the remakes, where Captain Kirk, the young handsome actor guy, goes in and he reprograms the machine so he can win. That's what these guys are doing, right? They're reprogramming the machine so they can win. That's not what we'd all do, but most of us wouldn't be in that situation because there's a lot of reprogramming that had to happen to get there. All this creating of this thing and making it real, it's a little too much for a lot of us. I personally, now, I've tested my toe in it at different times of my 20-year-long broadcasty type entertainment, 30-year-long now broadcasting entertainment kind of living that I've made. Well, maybe I'll provoke here, and what if I say something extreme there? Oh, what if I create a beef with this person here? Oh, look, it makes all my media go up. Oh, you get reinforced. That behavior gets reinforced. I don't like it. I don't have a stomach for it. I understand what it is, and I don't like it. Also, over time, you realize if everybody is creating conflict all the time, then doing the opposite, one, feels nice because you don't have to. I watch Stephen A. Smith just saying extreme things and then making the audience angry. or a lot of journalists now, they like will try to create debate and anger and frustration and conflict, and that looks exhausting. Oh, I want to use that energy to just follow my curiosity and see what I can learn. Looks exhausting. I prefer this. And fortunately, I get to be able to make a pretty good living not having to do that. But I'm lucky, I'm super lucky. So it's a WWE circus for some, sure. Not many prefer combat karate. I think you got World Let Way Championship, which is awesome, glory, etc. I would say it's more like college sports where competitors are more hungry, less acting. It's all pretty weird, right? But we just understand it and then decide how we fit into it. And also the reason I often bring these things up is because I feel like if something is provoking our emotion to be all wound up all the time, they're stealing from us. Right? They're harvesting our emotion to get us to promote something for them or buy a pay-per-view or to fight about something or promote Fox or CNN or MSNBC or whatever, or yell on Facebook. They're stealing from us, right? Don't let that happen. And sometimes it's fun, some a little bit of it's fun. But if you spend a lot of time yelling at in all caps at people, your time and energy and focus is being stolen by someone who's harvesting it for profit. So if the more you understand it, the less that's going to happen to us, right? And I could just be crazy too, I could just be fucking out of my head. But this all starts to make sense over time. Jake Paul is more like SoundCloud rap as a reaction to pop music. Hey, yeah, same thing. You're picking up what I'm laying down. It's a reaction over time. Something so become the counterculture becomes the mainstream, then something has to come along and usurp the mainstream's former cool, right? And it's not a surprise. It's not a coincidence. If you really want to look at how intelligent these people who are not high level, really not yet, if they're going to be high level boxers, this whole suddenly realizing, wait a second, the UFC and how they pay fighters is a thing that's being talked about on ESPN and who's a partner and in mainstream. I can use that. That shows you that sort of, adaptive mentality. The hair is on fire. Well, thank you. Thank you. What's your advice on how to figure out a career for yourself? This pops up a lot, actually. Um, I don't know the answer in this period in time, but over the last number of years, for me, it was try to consistently do the thing that you like so that by doing it a lot, you'll be able to share it a lot, but you'll also get a lot better at it. And if you reverse engineer it, whatever you might one day be good at, let's say in 5 years, you're going to have to work super hard at it. So things should probably be something you enjoy doing. So you'll do it a lot, therefore getting better at it. Therefore, also the better you get, the more you make, the better you get. And it all starts to happen, right? That's a craftsman's mindset, they call it. Why didn't Tyron throw more punches? Didn't he beat himself by not going after him? If you go back and watch his last four fights, and there was one, the last one against Vincente Luque, where he did, but kind of overdid it in the other direction. But the other three before that, and even the Wonderboy fights, and for years, this is how he's been performing. If you asked him to explain it, he couldn't. We behave the way that we can behave. It's very difficult for us all. Hey, why'd you yell at your dog? This is an odd one, but my dog barked at a lady's dog the other day, and she said, "God damn it," as she walked away. And for a second, I was mad. And then I realized, wait a second, she just did that because she was frightened. And that was a natural response. If you asked her why she said that, she couldn't tell her. But if I got mad and you asked me why did I get mad, I'd say, well, because she was mad. But she wasn't mad. Like, we just are humans. Like, we behave the way we're going to behave. We do the best we can. Tyron Woodley did the best he could. And you'd be like, no, he could have thrown more punches. If he could have, he would have. But he didn't. you know? You know? Total strike output beats less but more significant strikes. I'm not a judge, and it all changes. Total strike output, you throw 200 strikes, beats less but more significant strikes. Nah, see, I don't know. If it was one more but less and they're way more significant, or it's eight more and less, and it's a tiny, like, it's such a sliding thing. These are general. I can't make these generalizations. I don't know the answers to those. Jake's popularity in combat sports related to the power of a good storyline and being a different cool or coat point of view. Uh, yes, yes, good stories, good storytelling. Listen, this moment was created by the people who came before it. Boxing, HBO boxing, Showtime boxing, the UFC, Bellator, everybody. We created this moment. And over the last decade, we sold stories, we sold conflict, we sold these guys really don't like each other. We sold beefs, we sold hype, we sold narratives, we sold buzzwords. And so we created this to some young guy comes along and goes, hey, I think I understand this system. We made it. It's not anyone's fault. I enjoy Jake Paul fights because of the spectacle. Yeah, well, there you go. This he creates that. How crazy is it if he can grind out a belt? That's a really interesting point. Belts don't matter at all. Like they don't. Again, that was created. If every single week the winner gets a title shot and then another winner fights for a title and another guy or woman wins the title, holds it up, says the things, takes the photos, we do the thing week after week after week over years, there's no meaning left, right? So that's another area. It's like once upon a time being the champion had value, now it doesn't. So being a better speaker, a flashier thing, champion has value to the champion because he makes some more money. There's old leftover value in it. But because we commodified that and we increased the power of selling, hype, marketing, buzz, etc., they can come along and use that without ever needing to get a title, right? If Jake and Tyron were in a boxing video game, what would their overall ratings be? Well, I don't know. Low. That was a low level fight, right? It was a pretty low level fight. An older guy, not doing kind of his specialty, doing only a portion of the decathletes, thing. And then a younger, hungry guy who's not that good yet. That's where we're at. Those are the fights this kid's going to try to set up. And I'm not, it's just what it is. Do love the point on nuance. You get into these topics in super interesting ways. Thank you. It's the same thing for me. A lot of the old topics are just so played to death for me that I just don't care. And I'm not saying that to be rude. I just don't. I couldn't motivate myself to go in there and go, let's break this down. This guy's got power punching and this guy's got it, yada, yada. I'm just bored of that, super bored. And it's all just, we know way more than that now, but we still do that. It's a weird thing on HBO. It was called Fake Fame. And they showed that after the pandemic hit, all these influencers were still taking pictures of themselves on beaches and and it's like, that's not real. Why are you still doing that? And it's the same thing. There are times where I'm gainfully employed to wear a suit, hold the mic and do a thing. And I'll still try to, within the paradigms of what they want, do it in a way that I think is still meaningful. But I can't just stand there and say, this is a striker versus grappler in a stylistic match. I just can't do that. Winner gets a title shot, knockout, power in both hands. I can't do any of that. I feel like a fraud and an idiot. so I don't. But thank you. You gave me a compliment and then I meandered somewhere. Bring back celebrity deathmatch. No death matches. No. What are some of your favorite martial arts movies? God, that's a tough one. I love just old Bruce Lee movies. I really do. He was a great artist, but there's a lot. What is some of your? But yeah, I'll do a stream on that at some point. I'll make a list. That'll be fun. It was Leah Robin. It was obviously a staged fight. After 4 rounds, Jake Paul was gassed, throwing feints, and Tyron went back off blatant fix, babe. Well, I mean, so you could, and this is something I'm very careful about. You could look at something and say, I see all of this, therefore it is so. Or you can look at it and go, wait a second, could I question that I know enough to say that? Perhaps I don't understand. Perhaps it's myself I shouldn't trust, right? We see this often. People be like, obviously Kelvin Gastelum, or obviously, John Jones is doing X, if I can see that. It's like, maybe question your own ability to see that. It takes action to identify. So that's something we didn't touch on. It is like fraud and racketeering to fix a fight, to fix a actual fight. It has happened, rarely, but you'd have to be literally insane. And think about this, to do it on 12, 15, 16 cameras that are recorded for all eternity that the FBI can look through. And they would hire experts. And you know who they would hire? I'm sorry, not you. They would hire me. I'm not saying that to be a dick. They would hire people who have a long thousands of hours of expertise in being able to detect that. And even then, It just wasn't. And often this is a real key for a lot of us. It's really valuable. If we say obviously about something we actually are not, don't have a lot of experience in, we should question that perhaps with more knowledge, this would not seem so obvious, that the obvious nature of it. Like if you look at a car and you don't know anything about how cars work, you'll be obviously that's magic, right? Like obviously that is magic. Obviously that's what that is, right? But then when you learn more, you understand that that's obvious. That's not magic. That the obvious, that being obvious to you was due to a lack of understanding what you were seeing and how all the mechanisms worked, right? Um, what are your career goals? Is being a UFC commentator a goal of yours? Maybe something much larger? I actually don't have any specifically right now, other than continuing to get better and doing better work. But that's a really kind question to ask, and it's valuable for me to think about. But right now, I just want to do what I'm doing better and learn more and try to find more truthful ways to do it. And then this environment lets me do that a lot. So for now, being able to have 300,000 people follow or subscribe to me on across all platforms lets me do my thing and do it in my own way with no bosses or no overly I can't do this or I must do that. And that lets you do the most truthful study, right? Um, I don't have a Showtime gig. I don't work for Showtime. I am entirely uh, free. On I make little partnerships with individual humans in places. Who's a guy who'll be like works for the digital department of a thing. He'll be like, I will give you $2 to make me 5 breakdowns. That's it. I work for TSN, who is a UFC broadcast partner. I can say whatever I want about the UFC. Have never even met a person at I literally have never met a human being that is an executive of Showtime. On occasion, I do shit for Bellator. Never met a Showtime person in person ever in my life. I'd like to, but I haven't. So I get to say whatever I want. But that's again, when we go back to cognitive dissonance, it's like, okay, this doesn't make sense to me. So therefore something's wrong. Maybe it's fake. Well, this guy who I thought I trusted says maybe I'm wrong. He's got to be bought off, right? Like we just keep finding new layers to hold on to our belief. I think it's fake. Robin Black says, maybe you're missing something. Well, Robin Black's got to be paid off too, right? Like this is what we do, right? And it doesn't make us bad people. This is a human thing. And by noticing it, we can consider it. We can consider that's possible. Or we can go, fuck you, Robin Black. You're clearly a shill and this guy's fake and you're all fake and everything's fake, right? It's up to us. Right? What MMA fighters do you want to see come over to Karate Combat? Oh, that's a good one. Do want to see Lyoto fight before he retires. Wonderboy, yeah, I do. I want to see Lyoto fight Wonderboy. They were talking, oh, wouldn't it be great if Lyoto fought George? That would also be cool, of course. But I want to see Lyoto fight Wonderboy. That would be great. Hey, listen, everybody, you got hundreds of people hanging out with you to watch you just talk, sitting in your room about whatever comes to the top of your head about these topics. It's a very, very big, generous thing, and I'm super grateful. It's a really cool thing. Yeah, it's a weird time, literally there are people in whatever field, cooking, baking, cars, politics, whatever, and people like me, and we just spend all day, consuming, studying, learning for decades. And then hopefully we got something useful to offer you. And some of it you listen to and gain something from it, hopefully. And some of it you just dismiss. And that's the soup of what's available to us. I'm just glad to be able to give you this soup. Um, uh, you know, um, Thoughts on the Lawler Diaz fight? Yeah, that's fun. We're gonna do a Lawler Diaz. This is what we're gonna do. I think either late Wednesday or Thursday. I'm gonna watch Lawler Diaz 1, and I'm gonna count it in so you guys can watch it, and then we'll analyze it in real time. That's a great idea. That is a really great idea. Um, we will watch Lawler Diaz 1 in real time, maybe 2 or 3 times, and I'll count you in so we all watch it together. Who's into that? Of course we're into that. It's gonna be super fun. Thanks everybody. Please share this and follow me on Instagram at Robin Black Martial Arts or Twitter or TikTok or wherever. If you want a shirt, it's a Bink shirt or Enjoy the Hostilities. It's at shoprobinblack.com. Might take me a few weeks to get it to you, but appreciate it. Much love. Blackout.